get to share some information, some learning between different countries. So over the past 2 decades, the issue of sustainability and sustainable development has become more widely recognised. Policymakers, legislators at all levels now recognise the importance and increasingly implement measures that seek to provide environmental protection and social equity while still pursuing economic growth and stability. Energy efficiency has become a large piece of that puzzle for a number of reasons. The first reason is that energy, and in particular electricity, is directly linked to carbon emissions. If you look at the symbol we often see associated with CO2, it's the power plant cooling tower. The second reason is that energy consumption can be easily measured, which in turn means that our efforts, or the efforts of legislators, to reduce consumption can be easily measured. Thirdly, electricity is used by everybody, and therefore everyone can have a positive or negative impact. So energy efficiency can be seen as engaging because everybody can feel what's happening. The other big reason, and I guess the one that I'll be talking about a bit today, is that energy efficiency can have a positive financial impact. Energy efficiency in Australia is big business because it's good business. It makes financial sense to invest in energy efficiency projects as they have high returns. So if we move on to slide 1, we can see that electricity price modelling has energy prices rising steadily over the next 6 years. What this slide unfortunately doesn't show is that Australian electricity prices have more than doubled since 2008, and that Australian gas prices are predicted to rise more quickly due to the demand for exports from China and other rapidly growing countries across Asia. The impact of these rising prices is decreased rates of return, or payback periods, as these are often referred to. For energy efficiency projects, the prices coupled with falling prices for clean technology has seen a rapid uptake of both new building energy efficiency projects and the retrofitting and upgrading of existing buildings and industrial plant. Moving on to slide 2, I make a few points regarding the context of energy efficiency within the Australian market. As discussed, energy costs are rising, and with downward pressure on the global economy and a change to a federal government that has a less focus on carbon and more on energy efficiency, we are seeing a shift in language throughout Australia and throughout the green building industry to productivity. So we're now looking at productivity and efficiency of delivery rather than looking at reducing carbon or reducing energy for energy's sake. The other shift in language that is emerging now that we are looking at is energy efficiency has been seen more as a financial term. The carbon has disappeared from energy efficiency in terms of language in Australia, and the term and the financial perspective has been more and more prudent. So we're looking at terms such as investment barriers, or sometimes more softly, they're seen as barriers, financial barriers. So there are 4 main areas that these barriers fit within. They're generally financial, organisational, knowledge, and market-based factors. So what I'll do and individually and give you an overview of how both state and federal government are seeking to address them. If we move on to slide 3, we can look at some of the financial barriers to energy efficiency projects. Financial barriers include such things as access to capital and split incentives. Access to capital, which in Australia for the most part focuses on landlords or building owners, companies always face tough decisions on how to spend their money. More often than not, they favour spending money on increasing sales rather than decreasing costs. So even though decreasing costs may actually reap a higher return on investment and be better for the business profitability. Nevertheless, this decision-making can make accessing capital difficult. Australia's solution has been to introduce government grant funding for energy efficiency projects. In particular, the Clean Technology Investment Program, or CTIP as it's known. The program was funded out of the Australian Carbon Price Mechanism and involved a competitive application process and match funding of up to 50% of the total project cost. The uptake for this scheme has been quite good. And there's been a lot of good projects that have come through. The scheme is currently in a state where we don't know if it's going to continue under the new government, but we do hope it does so because of the effectiveness of the scheme. The Greening Government Buildings Fund is another program which is aimed at upgrading government buildings by providing upfront funding for energy efficiency projects, which is repaid to the fund over a number of years through the energy cost savings achieved through the project. Split incentives focuses on tenants in leased premises. There is generally a disincentive for landlords to pay for energy efficiency measures with long-term leases, as it is the tenants who benefit from the lower energy bills. The government has tried to bridge this gap via the incentivising the uptake of environmental upgrade agreements, known as EUAs, where tenants pay for the energy efficiency upgrades through rates payments. If we move on to slide 4, it shows a simplified diagram of how EUAs work. So in short, the building owner, council and finance provider voluntarily enter into an environmental upgrade agreement. The building owner agrees to carry out the environmental upgrade works. The finance provider agrees to advance the funds for the works. And council agrees to level environmental upgrade charges to pass repayments on to the finance provider minus the council processing fees. In the end, the user pays, and that's why the building owners are quite fond of EUAs. They generally focus on high-value projects. So we're looking at complete chilled water system replacement or district energy schemes, including tri-generation systems. Moving on to slide 5, we look at some of the organisational barriers that are faced by business. One of the top issues faced by sustainability or energy managers is getting buy-in from board level executives, particularly at a time when financial pressures on business is high, having just come out of one of the biggest downturns in the global economy that we've seen for a long time. Getting those issues in front of the board level members when they've got other things to focus on can be quite difficult. There are many problems faced by the boardroom. Getting energy efficiency notice can be a challenge. In order to address this, both federal and state governments have taken action to ensure that these projects are A, identified, and B, noticed at board level. The Energy Efficiency Opportunities Program requires businesses above a certain energy threshold, and at the present it's 0.5 petajoules, to assess their energy use, investigate energy efficiency opportunities, and present these opportunities to financial decision makers. The program ensures that projects make it to the boardroom by mandating that leading executives sign off on reporting and putting in place penalties for businesses that do not comply. The legislation doesn't force businesses to act on opportunities, but it does force them to publicly report any opportunities that have in 4 years, and in subsequent years to explain why they have not implemented these projects. The program developers believe that the 4-year return on investment cap that is put on those projects will lead to implementation of projects due to the high return on investment and the low risk. The state government has acted to capture the next rung of businesses down the energy use ladder. It runs a similar but more simplified scheme for the tier of businesses that sit just below that 0.5 petajoule threshold. In slide 6, which we move on to next, we look at the knowledge barriers faced by business. Whilst the industrial sector has focused on production efficiency and therefore energy efficiency for many years, there aren't many people in the commercial business sector who are truly experts in energy efficiency. Unless you're an expert, it can be difficult to fully appreciate the opportunities that energy efficiency presents. Furthermore, hello. Did I jump? Okay, shall I continue? Shall I continue? Okay, no problem. Okay, so back to the start of knowledge barriers. Whilst the industrial sector is focused on production efficiency and therefore energy efficiency for many years, there aren't many people in commercial business who are truly experts in energy efficiency. Unless you're an expert, it can be difficult to fully appreciate the opportunities that energy efficiency presents. Furthermore, if you can't digest and use the information that's out there, then it can be meaningless. The Australian government has funded a range of information programs through the Energy Efficiency Information Grants Program, again funding through the Australian Carbon Price Mechanism. The funding went, for the most part, to either regional or sector-based schemes, such as Dairy Australia, who focused on smarter energy use in dairy farms. There was the Australian Hotels Association, which focused on energy efficiency in hotels. And also regional schemes such as the Brisbane Green Heart scheme, which looked at improving the knowledge of the areas of sustainability leaders. Local governments are also creating organisations to engage businesses on energy efficiency, to get them talking about what works and what doesn't, and to start measuring the impacts of the projects and the impact on energy efficiency and energy consumption, also the costs and the reduction of carbon. The program City Switch started out as a Sydney-based program for sharing knowledge between tenants within the Sydney area. Due to the success of that program, it has now gone national and is one of Australia's leading portholes for energy efficiency information. We'll move on to slide 7 now, which gives an overview of market barriers to energy efficiency. For developers, there's been a preconception that environmental considerations for buildings aren't worth investing in because tenants don't recognise them and aren't willing to pay a rental premium. And whilst that can be true in some cases, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, RICS, report that vacancy rates in green buildings are considerably lower as tenants seek to both reduce ongoing costs and associate themselves with higher rated buildings to align with corporate social responsibility targets. In Australia, we have a number of rating systems to help businesses identify green buildings, such as Green Star, which is a voluntary scheme primarily about building design, but also trialling an in-use or performance rating tool. Green Star is very similar to the LEED rating tool, which I believe is used more commonly throughout Lanka and I suppose less common in Australia. We also have a rating system called Neighbours, which is focused solely on energy and water. Neighbours is a legislated scheme which focuses on building performance and building use. So if we move on to slide 8, we look at the impact of the CBD program. The CBD program directly links to Neighbours. So the CBD program requires all commercial spaces greater than 2,000 square metres to hold a valid building energy efficiency certificate and to publish these on all advertising material when the space is being leased or being sold. As you can see, the legislation has again forced business to consider the performance of their buildings, and therefore it has led tenants to be able to actively pursue buildings which are more energy efficient and has driven up the uptake of green building leases. The upshot of all of this is that a certified premium green building attracts better rental returns than others and have much lower vacancy rates. So if we move on to slide 9 for the conclusion. I'm sorry, if we move on to slide 9 for the conclusion. So energy costs in Australia, and I believe across the world, are only going up. Technological advances mean there are huge opportunities to cut costs and emissions through energy efficiency. As the energy costs go up and the cost of technology goes down, these things are moving together to make it even more possible to reduce. However, there are many barriers that still exist to energy efficiency. Most importantly, information. So there is a role here for both government and private sector to help overcome these barriers. In Australia, they're trying to do what they can to make sure that both business and government are working together in order to green buildings as much as possible. In the end, what that leads to is greener buildings that are easier to fill and attract higher rental returns, which is better for both the client and for the building occupier. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. I think we might take questions now.
So thank you very much. So it's okay. Ayers is online. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Are you online? Can you answer any question if there are questions?
Yes, please.
Please, if you have any questions from the audience, please, anyone to come and ask questions, please. You can spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Okay. Okay, seems there are no questions. Okay, there's one question. Yeah. Come, please. There's one gentleman here ask questions.
Yeah, now a lot of acts and regulations, and my question is, what will happen now? Is non-compliance is a punishable offence? Or?
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Hello, sorry, I didn't catch the question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. Is now you mentioned about a lot of regulations and acts and all that. So my question is whether it is non-compliance is a punishable offence.
I'm sorry, was the question about non-compliance?
Yeah, it's asking non-compliance is a punishable offence.
Yes, some of the schemes are voluntary. So if you look at Green Star and LEAD and so on, the schemes are voluntary. But the Energy Efficiency Opportunities Act is a piece of legislation, and non-compliance with that act is illegal, and it does carry financial penalties, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jeremy. Ayers. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.